in most cases, a work injury that you have in Minnesota with a Minnesota employer is going to be covered. But there's a lot of things that can kind of happen in between, all right? And so really to analyze your case and kind of just simply put, we've got to look at several factors. And each one is going to be weighed differently. But one, are you an employee? All right. Two, who's your employer? Because you could be an employee, but if you're an employee that gets injured in a different state with an employer that has no connections to Minnesota, then it's probably not going to be covered under Minnesota law. But there are always exceptions to that rule as well. So we've got, are you an employee? Who's the employer? Then we also look at the nature of the injury. All right, what type of injury did you sustain? Because some injuries in Minnesota are compensable, meaning that they've got to pay, and there are other ones that aren't. So for example, you don't like your boss, all right? Or your boss has, said some mean things to you and that have arisen and caused maybe psychological or psychiatric symptoms. Now, is that right? Should your boss have done that? Probably not, okay? But is there a remedy under workers' compensation for you? In other words, is there something that you can obtain for it? And it may be that no, because under the workers' compensation law, there are limited circumstances that mental injuries are covered. That includes post-traumatic stress disorder. So that's just one example of where you have to be careful about what type of injury. Sometimes we have specific injuries where we, and I call them the duh injuries. You slip and fall, you're lifting something and then something hurts, right? Like there's that immediate sense that something, that happened. There's a temporal relationship to that. But then we have other injuries where maybe it's a cumulative injury. It's over time. And that can be minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years that it takes. And those sometimes can be a little bit harder to kind of to get through because you've got to make that connection. And I refer to it as a nexus. You've got to draw that connection to the work activities, and did that put you at an increased risk for injury? And then we obviously have our mental injuries, like I said, about post-traumatic stress disorder. So when we start talking about does my work injury qualify for benefits, we've got to understand those factors. And really this is why you can look up all the information on the internet and you can try to see if you fit within some specific guidelines. But what I always encourage people to do is talk to a well-experienced workers' compensation lawyer. And I say that by experienced is because there's attorneys who try to do this on kind of an ad hoc basis. And those are the attorneys that you got to be careful of, because they're the ones that are going to miss the minutia, the little details, because this law changes. It changes yearly. There are adjustments yearly, and there are exceptions and rules to a majority of the things that occur under workers' compensation. And if you don't know it, you're going to screw up. But the sad thing is that as an injured worker, you'll never know, because it's not going to be something that the other lawyer is most likely going to probably tell you. So when I say find an experienced, find an attorney that's knowledgeable in workers' compensation, that's handled this, and that is willing to try cases. Because there, I think you're going to understand that it's okay that those attorneys aren't going to be the ones that are going to try to settle your case or to give you advice just to earn a buck. So again, my best advice to people is take some of this knowledge, but then use it when you speak with a lawyer.